Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to continue our study on the Urantia Book and UFOs. And we're using a reference, a page that I've added so that we can access all these different references. And if you'd like to get to this page, let me tell everyone how to get here. It is at Fifth Epical Revelation Fellowship. .com or Urantia, Atlanta Urantia Study Group.org, either one, and it's under the link for the blue book, blue illustrated book. You can see it there. And if I go all the way over here, you'll see it's the blue book, Urantia Book, standardized, and there's papers /UFO-Urantia-references.html. So that's the page for y'all who do not see this anywhere, because it's not got another link anywhere. I guess I should put a link on the front page, shouldn't I? Which I may do this week. Okay. Yeah. So that everybody can find it a little bit easier. And tonight we're going to actually get into the part on the Urantia book. We talked mostly about, last time we watched a few little videos, and then we talked about Dr. Greers' work under his seriousdisclosure.com. And under that, there's an area I wanted to show y'all. Under that link is an area that he has where there's a bunch of documents. Let me see if I can find this. Here again. Isn't there? There's the expose, hoax expose I wanted y'all to read too. But there's, let me go back here. I'm in the wrong link, I think. Okay, here we go. Under papers. This is the one we went to last week, but under this link, there is also just papers. See if I can get to that. There we go. There we go. There it is. And the link is seriousdisclosure.com C-SETI-papers. And under this, there are a bunch of papers that Dr. Greer have put out, and they're all pretty short. But these, I've read through most of them, and every single one of them is worth reading. It really is. So I wanted to tell y'all about it so you can go out in your spare time and look at these, because they he talks a lot about all this stuff about threat of UFOs and how he feels that most extraterrestrials are friendly and they're no threat to the United States. They're no threat to the world. They're not aggressive whatsoever. And he goes into a lot of this. And the other thing, the hoax that the government tried to put over on people to make them afraid of UFOs, and how he thinks a lot of the alien abduction things and animal help me, dear. Mutilations. A lot of them are staged by our own federal government. And now, why would you think they would do that? They do it to create fear.
Create fear and control the masses.
That control the masses. And he talks a lot about that, and how that there's other theories about these things happening. One of which, if it is extraterrestrials that's doing some of this, it may be a scientific study by the extraterrestrial. And I got another idea that no one's even mentioned about some of these. What if it is the life carriers that are actually doing these to check the progress of the evolution of the animals of the planet? The other thing that he mentions is it could be being done so that they can find out how, the extraterrestrials, what he's talking about, how the drugs and the antibiotics that we're taking right now is going to affect the organs of humans. Okay.
Mhm.
So this is information that the drug companies definitely wouldn't want out, right? Because if we're all
Roger,
taking stuff that's making
Can-
us sick, they don't want us to know, right? Yeah, Jane.
can you just repeat that last sentence?
Yeah,
Please.
I said he believes it could be the extraterrestrials testing the drugs that we take against the organs of the animals they're taking out and seeing how these drugs are affecting the organs of certain types of animals. Okay, because as everybody knows, well, we should know that the life that was implanted on this planet, the goop of all the creatures and all the planets, all that came from the same manipulation. Okay, so if something affects us, it affects every single plant, every single animal, everything in the planet. Okay, so what he feels is this: he feels that some of these animal mutilations, I don't know why I'm having trouble with that word today. Some of these animal mutilations may be the extraterrestrials testing the organs of these animals to see how they could help us improve our resistance to disease. Okay, which makes sense, you know.
I was on this site last week from 6 to 7. And after we shut this down, I watched television. At 9 o'clock, I watched Rachel Maddow. I don't know if any of you watch her on MSNBC.
No, I don't watch NBC at all. Yeah.
It's real news. It's the truth. And she was reporting that there are those who are now saying that all this voter irregulation is done by the UFOs, by the extraterrestrials. And she was just laughing out the kazooie.
Yeah.
But it was really frightening to have left this program here and gone to that program there.
Yeah.
And she got through with that and went on to other things. But yeah, that's being purported as well as other things that cause
she's trying to debunk Mike Lindell.
Yeah, Mike Lindell's got lots of enemies out there. Everything he says, they try to debunk it. So
yeah, you got that right.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to share these papers with y'all and let y'all go out and read them on your own, and you can make your own decisions about these, because some of it is right on the money, and you can see why they do this. And the thing is, big tech and the government wants to control us. I mean, that's for sure, you know. So that's what he's stating. This is what all this hush hush is about, the UFO technology and ETs and that sort of thing. They don't want us to know, you know, because it creates more freedom for us.
Aren't they doing a very good job now with these COVID and all the viruses and those things? There's a lot of government control, you know, controlling the masses. And I thought perhaps, you know, they might even be studying animals for all these things that supposedly the source of all the viruses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we know that, well, the US and China both do that, right? They both study, you know, animals for, see how they react to viruses and diseases and stuff like that. The problem is when they step over the line from studying the viruses and the transmission of the viruses and that sort of stuff to manipulating and creating viruses.
Perhaps the aliens could be doing that.
Well, I don't know that the aliens would have a reason to do that. I really don't. You know, it brings me back to a quote from Jesus. It always brings me back to the same quote. And that is, when Jesus was on the planet and he was walking around, he basically said once that he did not believe there was anything in the entire universe or cosmos that is threatening to him or to us, either one.
That it's friendly.
That the universe is friendly, right? So if we go from that standpoint, we would think that all this alien stuff, they should be friendly too, right?
To help us, yes.
To help us, right? And
Yeah.
we're going to kind of go from that standpoint tonight, because what we're going to do, close this other one. What we're going to do is we're going to take all these references from the Urantia book and show how they relate to what we're studying here. Okay. And we're going to start on this very first paragraph. And we have read these two paragraphs before. So let's get started on it. And I'm going to relate it to back to what we're talking about. Okay. So let's see, Diane, you want to take the first one?
There are some
There are 7 different conceptions of space as it is conditioned by time. Space is measured by time, not time by space. The confusion of the scientists grows out of failure to recognize the reality of space. Space is not merely an intellectual concept of the variation and relatedness of universe objects. Space is not empty, and the only thing man knows which can even partially transcend space is mind. Mind can function independently of the concept of the space relatedness of material objects. Space is relatively and comparatively finite to all beings of creature status. The nearer consciousness approaches the awareness of 7 cosmic dimensions, the more does the concept of potential space approach ultimacy. But the space potential is truly ultimate only on the absolute level.
Okay, now think about what he's saying here. First, I want to make it the point that he's talking about space is, our consciousness of space is only aware when we approach the 7 cosmic dimensions of space. And we've talked about this several times, right? That space exists in 7 different dimensions, and including in these dimensions are what? The finite, the Urantia, and the spiritual. Okay. Now think of the finite. The finite has millions and millions of variations of human beings. Okay. That's just the finite. So if we just think of that, if we think of these UFOs, there must be millions of different types of beings that are far advanced to us, right, on other planets. So what would keep them from hopping in a spaceship that they can travel and buzzing around Earth to check us out, right? Because why? We're, number one, a quarantine planet, and we know that even the quarantine planets, the student visitors are allowed to visit. Okay, so that's one thing that the UFOs can be. Now, when we see the physical UFOs, more than likely, that is more than likely what they are, other types of physical beings other than us. All right, but I'm going to go take it one step further. How about if they are Urantia type beings, right? We know that the Urantia type beings are what? One of the different cosmic dimensions, right? They're outside our sight range, okay? So being outside our sight range, they could be traveling around in ships that are totally different than the finite type of vehicles, right? The other thing is this, them being other than finite type of beings, they have a Urantia physicality that's totally different than ours. What do y'all think about this? You know, these vehicles that we've been seeing on these videos that can zip around and in unbelievable amounts of speed, right? If they're a different type of dimension, they may not even be affected by the time space that we know of. So that would keep them from being affected by moving at such rapid rates. Okay, so when we see these lights flying around and that sort of thing that we can't identify, that's one possibility they could be. Now we're going to take it one step further. Okay, not only the Urantia type beings, right, but there's the spiritual type beings too. And we know that spiritual beings can move through space irregardless of what? physical space. They can move from place to place, okay, without ships. Who's to say that these lights that we see pop on and breaking up and that sort of thing, who's to say those aren't spiritual beings, right? Buzzing around, you know? We don't know.
I thought the spiritual beings were not visible to us.
They're not visible to us, Gary, but what I'm relating this back to is this: the guardian seraphim and the seraphic transports, because they tell us in the book when the transports come and go from the planet, they leave a physical trail behind them. And they say that even humans can see the physical trail at many times coming and going from the planet, which is interesting. Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
But-
you can actually see these trails from the Seraphic Transports many times taking off. And it's interesting because the Seraphic Transports leave when? At midnight at the spiritual pole of the planet. Okay. Now, where is the spiritual pole of the planet? They speculate, the Urantians speculate that it was at one time, so they speculate that it still is. It's out in the redwoods of California. Okay. So if that's the case, if you're out near California or anywhere close to there, you might actually see a glimpse of these seraphic transports coming and going around midnight at those places, you know. So that's kind of interesting too. So it adds a different dimension to what we may be seeing out there. Now, I'm going to add one more thing to that, and that's this. We know we have midwayers stationed on this planet, right? And we know that midwayers are just outside our sight range. The thing about midwayers, though, they can make themselves visible at will, okay? So how do we know it's not midwayers buzzing around up there too? You know, because the only way they keep midwayers from leaving the planet is the midwayer oath that they won't leave the planet, because they're capable of navigating away from the planet on their own accord. Okay, so who's to say some of this stuff we're seeing is not midwayers? Now, these tic tacs and things like that, I'm of the opinion that those are probably other mortal types beings of other physical sources. Okay, and we're going to study some of those a little bit later in paper 49. When we get to paper 49, we're going to have an eye opening. Because of why? Because there's beings out there that, number one, don't breathe air. There's beings out there that live in water. Some of them breathe air, some of them don't breathe air, some of them are what they call super breathers, some are what they call sub breathers. But the fact is this: if they don't breathe air and they don't have lungs, would they have to worry about their lungs collapsing in a vehicle that can move at such extraordinary rates? Not really, if you think about it, right? Plus, they may have technology that protects them when they move at these rates, right? Ships and things. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring up this paragraph, and this is straight from Jesus. This is Jesus talking on the way to Rome, okay? And he's talking about one other thing in this paragraph that I want to bring out that I think is very, very important, and that is this concept of mind, okay? And it says right here, space is not empty. The only thing man knows which can even partially transcend space is what? Mind. That's right. So if that's the case, when what Dr. Greer is talking about, when he's communicating with alien beings off this planet, okay, he is doing it through mind. And if he's doing it through mind, how's he going to have to, what would he have to use to do that? He would have to use the mind circuit, right? So it would be the local universe mind spirit of our creative mother spirit, wouldn't it? Okay, so if he's communicating through this mind circuit, really space would be transcended at no problem whatsoever. And that's the only way he could communicate through space with mind. Make sense? That's why I brought this paragraph.
Well, you got a point there, because I know he does transcendental meditation when I have a friend that has been with Dr. Greer doing a contact,
Yeah.
and they go into a TM,
Yeah.
and they appear. So that takes care of that, kind of confirms what you're saying.
Yeah, they
But
actually have films.
here's a
They have films of these beings appearing behind these groups. Have you seen those, Gary?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, they've actually got films of some of his groups and some of his contact sessions, and you can actually see some kind of being of light sometimes standing behind the people that are in this transcendental meditation. It's kind of interesting, you know?
I got a thing. It says space is measured by time,
Right,
not time by space.
right.
It's throwing me for a loop mentally.
I know the first time I read that, it did the same thing to me, right? Because we're
Does-
conditioned and we're taught just the opposite, right?
Well,
Yeah.
they're talking about the space measurements in light years.
Right, right.
That's the that's the distance that light will travel in a year's time.
Yeah, that's the only way we can relate to it, right? Okay,
Right.
but it's just the opposite to the celestial beings, right? So to them, let's see, how would that work? The space.
So a light year would be relating by time space, because
Right,
you're relating the distance, by 1 year.
right. How long it
with the
takes to travel
constant.
there. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
they would
they're
have to
doing
use
the
the speed of light.
opposite. So they're saying the opposite. So space is measured by time.
Space is measured by how long it takes for a light, for the motion of light to get to a certain point, right?
Yeah, that's our way of doing it,
Yeah, it would be just the opposite
but
of
that's
that.
not what we're told to do, it says, because that would
Right.
be time in relationship to space.
Right,
But how do you measure it by time? Time there would be no speed requirement,
yeah,
because
because
it would just be the time it takes you to go from place A to place B based on your
ability to travel.
situation.
Yeah, ability
Well,
to travel. And the reason they say that, Gary, is this. There are beings like mighty messengers where their travel is almost instantaneous. And we know that the thought adjusters are instantaneous, right? So if a thought adjuster leaves you right now, they can be on Divinington in the next millisecond, right? Because there is no space-time continuum to them.
Okay,
They live
Now I
outside
got it.
that, right?
now I figured it out.
Okay. It's a hard concept to wrap your head around.
Just don't ask me to explain it.
Right. But this is part of the seven cosmic dimensions too, that Jesus is talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's go into the next paragraph. Let's see, Ed's not there. Rodney, would you take that next little paragraph?
Yes. It must be apparent that universal reality has an expanding and always relative meaning on the ascending and perfecting levels of the cosmos. Ultimately, surviving mortals achieve identity in a seven-dimensional universe.
Okay, so ultimately, we travel through all seven levels of dimensions, right? Right now, we only have what? One dimension, the finite.
Mhm.
Okay, But as we go, as we climb through the universe and doing our ascension plan, ultimately we come in contact with all 7 dimension levels. Okay, and it's interesting here too, in this first part of this paragraph, he says, universe reality has an expanding, you see that? It's always expanding. It never comes back in. It's always expanding. All right. And it's always a relative meaning on ascending and perfecting levels of cosmos. So it has meaning only as we ascend through the ascension plan and become more and more perfect, that these 7 levels of or dimensions of the cosmos become apparent to us. Make sense? So it's an experiential thing. You have to experience to actually identify all 7 levels in the cosmos. Okay, now think about this. I want to come back to the UFO thing on this too. If reality is in 7 dimensional levels, okay, we only really identify with what? The finite level. Okay, when we brush up against, I don't know what other term to use, when we come in contact with any other dimension other than a finite dimension, then we're stepping outside our normal reality. You see that? So outside our normal reality can be many, many things. And I think part of this UFO phenomena is borderline between that finite reality and what would be the next reality, the Urantia reality, right? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. I got some quotes down here from Jesus a little bit farther down that demonstrates this. When Jesus made his first appearances right outside the tomb to Mary, what did he say? Touch me not.
Touch me.
Yeah. Why would he say that? Because he was on a different what?
Plane.
Level of reality. You see that?
Mhm.
That's all there is to it. So the same thing with, I got the quote down here at the bottom, the very bottom. When Jesus is talking to who? Thomas, right? And he says what? The
When
master
Thomas heard these words,
yeah, he says, when the master had so spoken, he looked down into the face of Thomas and said, what? And you, Thomas, who said you would not believe unless you could see me and put your finger in the nail marks of my hands, have now beheld me and heard my words. And though you see what? No nail marks in my hands. Why is that? Because he was in a different dimension. He was in a different form. He was in a different body. He was in a Urantia body. All right. And then he goes on to say, since I am raised in the form that you will also have when you have departed from this world, what will you say to your brethren? You will acknowledge the truth, for already in your heart you had begun to believe, and when you so stoutly asserted your unbelief, your doubts, Thomas, always most stubbornly assert themselves just as they are about to crumble. Thomas, I bid you not faithless, but believing. And I know you will believe even with a whole heart. And then the next paragraph is really the clincher. And Jane, would you read that next paragraph for us there? Unmute, Jane.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
When Thomas heard these words, that's the one, Roger?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. When Thomas heard these words, he fell on his knees before the Urantia master and exclaimed, I believe, my Lord and my master. Then said Jesus to Thomas, you have believed, Thomas, because you have really seen and heard me. Blessed are those in the ages to come who will believe even though they have not seen with the eye of flesh, nor heard with the mortal ear.
That's because he's in his Urantia form, right? The next dimension. And I want to read one more paragraph that's just above this 190. Gary, would you read that 190 for us, please?
I'll do it if I can see it.
Oh, okay. Do I need to
Oh,
bring it
I
down?
got it, I think. Okay. The mortals of the realms will arise in the morning of the resurrection with the same type, transition, or Urantia body that Jesus had when he arose from the tomb on his Sunday morning. These bodies do not have circulating blood. Well, my heart will be good then. And
Yeah.
such beings do not partake of ordinary material food. Nevertheless, these Urantia forms are real. When the various believers saw Jesus after his resurrection, they really saw him. They were not the self-deceived victims of visions or hallucinations.
Now remember, he made 19 appearances, right? In his Urantia form. Now keep in mind, the midwayers had to make available to the humans, all the humans, and some of these were large groups, the ability to see him in the Urantia form. Why is that? Because he was in the next dimension. Got that?
Roger, I have some questions.
Go right ahead, Rodney.
We know from reading about Jesus in the Urantia form, he did break bread
Yes,
and he did build a fire.
right. Material
But
fire.
my question is,
Yes.
can Urantia beings operate a material spacecraft?
That's the whole point, Rodney. I say yes. Okay. But it's probably not just a material spacecraft. It's a Urantia spacecraft that's on the borderline of what? Material and Urantia. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So probably we can see those craft when they come into our atmosphere
Okay.
because they're on that borderline of one dimension to another.
Now,
Yeah.
another question. What about a midwayer? Could they operate a
Same thing.
material
Same,
spacecraft?
same exact thing. They can operate a fully material spacecraft. Okay. But they
So-
can also operate a fully Urantia craft. Okay. That's why they call them midwayers. They're between what? Two realities. They're between two dimensions.
So life carriers, are they spiritual or are they Urantia or physical beings?
I would say, that is a good question, Rodney. And I am not sure if you would consider them spiritual or you would consider them more a Urantia type being. One thing's for sure, they have to be able to manipulate physical matter.
Exactly. They would, just
Yeah.
like the tree of Urantia,
Yes.
they would have to physically bring it in a ship to protect it.
That's exactly right. And we're
planet.
going to talk about that in just a second. That's one of these paragraphs up. Before we do that, though, let me say something else about this paragraph. It says here, when we rise in the Urantia form, right, we do not partake of ordinary food. You see that? Material food. We do,
Right.
however, partake in Urantia food, and there's no residual. In other words, if you eat something, you eat every bit of it. So they don't have any toilets on the mansion worlds. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one thing you don't have to worry about anymore.
It just absorbs.
It just absorbs. Okay.
Mhm.
But there is a Urantia type material food, just like there is. It's a different dimension, but it has the same effect, right? Only no residual. And we're going to find that paragraph here as we go down through this. This is pretty interesting stuff, isn't it?
There's probably Urantia restaurants,
I'm sure there are,
you know?
Yeah.
That's
The,
right. You walk
hey,
in the door and they
I've-
say, "Welcome to Moe's." You know?
Fast food.
Hey, I was reading about the shrub of Urantia just a couple days ago, and it said it was brought by the Melchizedeks from the constellation.
Yeah, it's right down here, and these we're gonna talk about that transfer, and it's transferred to the Garden of Eden.
So
But-
that's what's going to be a question as well.
Yes,
If Melchizedeks can operate a spaceship,
right.
and they're spiritual beings, right?
They're
Yes.
no, they're not spiritual beings. They're not considered. You don't have spiritual beings until you get outside the local universe, with the exception of the Creator, Son, and Daughter. Right? Anything inside the local universe would be more the dimension between spiritual and Urantia.
So a
okay?
high Urantia form.
It would be a higher Urantia form, right?
So they
Now,
can manipulate a ship.
they can manipulate stuff. Now, keep in mind the material sons and daughters, okay, who become the Adams and Eves, okay? Those are material beings, just like we are material beings, okay? That you would consider a mortal type being, because even though they're on a higher level and they don't die, they live on for year after year after year. They're encircuited so they don't degenerate like this body does, okay? But they are material, just like we are material. Now, an interesting part of that is this. When they have to transport Adam and Eve's to the planet, what do they have to do? They have to dematerialize.
They had to bring the tree of life.
Well, they had to bring the tree of life. That was physical, right? So that had to have come in some sort of vehicle or ship, right? So we know that 500,000 years ago, when before the Caligastia 100 arrived on the planet, we know that some sort of physical spaceship landed on the planet with the tree of life. You got me? That was 500,000 years ago. Okay? Just to bring the tree of life here. Now, the tree of life is what's called an encircuited plant. Okay, which means what? That means the circuit of the local universe runs through this physical tree, and it's the nutrition for all beings that are stationed here on this planet, so they regenerate and do not die. Okay, that's what keeps them from dying. Okay, so we know we had a spacecraft or space visitor 500,000 years ago when the tree of life came, right? We know that. All right. But let me say one other thing. When the Caligastia 100, and I have this right here in the next paragraph, when they arrived, how did they arrive? They arrived by what? Angelic transports, right? Seraphic transports. So what does that mean? That means that this Caligastia 100, this 50 couples, had to be what? Dematerialized on Urantia. And then when they got to the planet, they had to be rematerialized. And how did they do that? They took the DNA from beings that were already here on the planet and built them new bodies from the DNA of the beings that were already here. Talk about manipulating matter.
So avatars.
Yeah. So basically they built them avatars, and then what did they do? They plugged their essence into these beings, and since they were not only human beings, they were encircuited beings from the local universe. Since they were encircuited, as long as they had the tree of life, they would live forever. Okay? As long as they had the availability of the tree of life to regenerate their bodies. Now, why is this important? to what we're talking about, because these beings had to come to this planet in some other type of vehicle, including the Seraphic Transports, other than bringing themselves here. Okay.
So, Roger, did they also hold their personalities?
They did. They did. Now, the
Strange,
only
huh?
thing they did not have when they were reassembled on this planet, just like Adam and Eve, the only thing those beings did not have was what? Their thought adjusters.
Mhm.
They were not allowed to take their thought adjusters back to this planet. The thought adjusters are waiting on Adentia for the ones that didn't make it back. For the ones that did go back, they were reunited with their thought adjusters as soon as they got back. Okay. So that's another interesting point, is since they didn't have their thought adjusters, they didn't have what? The Father's guidance while they were on this planet. Maybe that's the reason so many of them rebelled. You think about that? They didn't have that small voice within saying, this is the way all the time, right?
Now you're referring to Caligasca's group and Adam and Eve, etc.,
Right, right.
without the thought adjusters.
Yeah, now Adam and Eve did not have thought adjusters before they came here, okay? Only the Caligasca 100. The Caligasca 100 were mortal just like we were. They went through the mansion worlds just like we would, but they hadn't fused with their adjuster. To be able to come back to the planet, they could not be adjuster fused mortals. They could only come if they hadn't fused with their adjusters. So when they were sent back to the planet, their adjusters did not come with them. Their adjusters waited on Adentia for them to return. Didn't matter how long it was. To God, there is no time. So, to the thought adjusters, it doesn't matter how long they're gone, right?
So there's a possibility that maybe in our career, before we fuse, we could do the same thing
Yeah, it's always a
on a
possibility.
primitive
Rod.
planet.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is this, Rodney, when there's never been a case when a human has fused with this adjuster that they would ever rebel. What do you think that is? Because God will not rebel against himself, will he?
Right.
So if you fuse with God, you're part of God, then you would never rebel against yourself, which would be part of God, right? Make sense?
No,
All of it kind
the
of
thought
makes
adjuster to me is kind of like a conscious Jimmy the Cricket. Okay.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, this would be the ultimate.
I didn't know that the thought adjusters, you know what I'm thinking about, maybe I'm wrong, but the thought adjusters we have independent thought.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
wouldn't be rebelling against God per se because of our independent thought and our ignorance.
Yeah.
It's the intent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
So
true.
I don't know if that carries through. I think, we have the
Well, think of it
independent
this
thought.
way, Gary, though, when you fuse with that thought adjuster, when we fuse with the Father fragment, with God himself, then you become a part of what? The circuit of God, right?
Yeah.
And then once you're part of the circuit of God, it would probably never occur to you to ever rebel against yourself like that circuit, right?
Well,
Because
what
when you
about
fuse,
cases of,
once you fuse, there's no separation again. That's the
well,
reason.
here's my point.
Yeah.
We have suicides.
Yeah,
That's a
but those
rebellion
people have not.
against self.
Yeah, they would not. Those people have not fused with their adjusters. People who commit suicide, right?
You're kidding me.
No.
You mean
but-
like a 97-year-old person still would not have fused with an adjuster?
Oh, there's
My
millions.
understanding is
Yeah,
the
millions.
adjusters.
Most people do. Mortals don't fuse with their adjusters till they hit around the 5th mansion world. So you have normally go through 5 mansion worlds before you're even ready to fuse with your adjuster. That's
So I
way
have
past.
no adjuster to send me to keep me straight.
Yeah, you're well, it doesn't really keep you straight anyway. What it does is it spiritualizes your life, your thoughts. And that's the job of the assessor. It's not really your conscience. You know, your conscience is, they actually state that in the book that it's not your conscience.
Yeah, I
That's
know
right.
that, but
Yeah.
my mental concept, that's the closest thing I could use
Yeah,
to
and
describe it.
that's a good mental concept of it, Gary, but it's more to make this life more spiritual, to spiritualize your everyday life. That's a better concept of it, really. And if you listen to your adjuster, they say if you try to hear your adjuster, that it will always lead you in the proper direction, right? That's why it kind of leads you through life because of the spiritual.
Psalms 46:10. Be still and know that I am God.
There you go. That's it. All right, let's get back to their stuff here. We're not going to get past the first paragraph again. Okay, let's go to the next paragraph. Student visitors. Okay, this is from paper 48. Okay, and notice here it says, student visitors are allowed on all inhabited planets, even in isolation. What does that mean? We're a planet that's in isolation. Why? Because we're in quarantine. Okay, because we're in quarantine because of the Lucifer rebellion along with 67 other planets. Because we're in quarantine, even though we are the student visitors from the mansion worlds and from other worlds, there's lots of different types of student visitors, are allowed to come to this planet. How do you think they come to this planet? They have to come one or two ways. Ships, right? Or Seraphic Transport. It wouldn't make sense that someone that is going past what they call earned space, if these people are above mortal, then all the mortal worlds would be what? Earned space. They can travel back there on their own. Okay, so they could come in what? Spaceships, right? Any type of spaceship. So what I want to bring out on this is how many of these things and lights and things like that flying around that we keep identifying, how many of those are student visitors or groups of student visitors? Have you ever seen these lights on these shows where they have sightings where it starts out a large light, right? And then it splits into multiple smaller lights. You remember ever seeing one of those?
Yeah.
What if those are actually large transports for celestial visitors and they break off into smaller lights when these celestial visitors want to go off on their own? Make sense? I mean, it would be a perfect explanation of what's going on there, right?
From the mothership.
From the mothership. That's right. And I remember on one of the gimbal movies from the Navy, the guy said in one of them, I don't remember if we watched one of the one that was this one or not, but there's one of them where the guy says, at one point, there's a whole fleet of them. You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. At one point, the Navy counted 67 different ships at the same time. You know, that would be considered a fleet of some kind of beings, right? And many times these fleets come back into one, you know, could be celestial visitors. All right. All right. Let's read the next paragraph. Millie, would you take the next paragraph? Host to celestial visitors. You still out there, Millie? I can't see it. Nope, she's not there. Bill, would you take it?
Sure. 3. Host to celestial visitors. These gracious creatures are dedicated to the entertainment of the superhuman groups of student visitors and other celestials who may chance to sojourn on the transition world. You will have ample opportunity to visit within any realm you have experientially attained. Student visitors are allowed on all inhabited planets, even those in isolation.
There it is, right? Even those that are in isolation, like us, these student visitors will have the opportunity to go to. Why? Because they were once human, okay? Once they pass through that human experience, the first dimension, once they step out of that first dimension, they have experientially earned the right to go back and visit any inhabitable planet. Makes sense?
I've got a conflict. I was under the understanding that once you left this world, you could not come back to this world.
That's just your native world, Gary, not all the rest of it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's for 1,000 years. You can't come back to your native planet, right?
For 1,000 years? I mean, I
For-
can't, if I pass before my wife, I can't come back.
You can't come back. That's right. You can't. You have to wait for her on the mansion world, right? You know, it's interesting you asked that because Houdini's big thing when he was alive back when the book was being related to us, okay, his big thing was he went to seance after seance after seance disproving the spiritualists. The reason being, he promised his dead mother that if there was any way that she could communicate back to him, he would talk to her, okay? And he spent his whole life trying to communicate with his dead mother, okay? Him and Thurston and William Sadler, they all three did it. They went around disproving spiritualists like crazy, okay? And that was in the 30s, 20s through the 30s, all right? But we can't come back to our original planet, but we can visit any other finite planet, any planet in the realm of the first dimension. You got me? All right. So, and then after 1,000 years, you can even come back to this planet. They just won't let you come back while there's any possibility you would know anyone or anyone had survived long enough that you could communicate with. It's a safeguard of the universe.
Oh, Roger, I have a curious question to ask you.
Go right ahead. That's why I'm here for, Jane.
It's
That's
just curiosity. So if we are in mention world 1 or 2 or 3, whatever,
right.
and we meet other mortals
Right.
from other, do we do that from other dimensions? We do, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
There'll be, plethora of beings we're going to meet. Yeah.
That are not native to our planet.
Not native to our planet. That's correct.
Correct. So
But-
if we befriend one of them, could we send a message to Earth?
No. That's not
Okay.
allowed. No communication with your original planet. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to send a message to your husband, if you leave before he does, you can forget it.
Okay.
He'll have to wait to get the message till he gets to the mansion worlds.
Nothing's that important, I guess.
Nothing is that important. That's right. Which brings up a point. We're almost out of time here, but it brings up a point. In this life, is there anything important enough that we would even need to communicate back to someone that's still here? Not really.
Not really.
Really not. And all these things we get worried about, politics, religion, all these things we get all uptight about and upset about and worried about. Are any of them important enough to worry about? Not really. Only thing we should be concerned about is what? Survival and getting to the first step. Because you can't take the next step to take the first step.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, the thing about it is, only thing that Jesus said they can do is kill the body, and then there's nothing more they can do.
Nothing more they can do to you. That's right. That's it.
Yeah.
All right. We're 6:59, y'all. So I guess we need to shut it down. I'm sorry I didn't get farther along. I'm trying, but
Not your fault.
we'll just keep going as long as it's all right with everybody. We will get back to paper 16, believe it or not, sooner or later. So let's have a short prayer and we'll quit for tonight. Father, thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to learn these wonderful concepts from this wonderful book. We thank you for this opportunity to share and teach each other and experience this world in a different way. And we pray that you'll bless each one of us for this study, that we might remember this when we get to the mansion worlds and we might be a little step ahead. We thank you. We give you the praise. And we thank you in the name of your son, Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen.
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 Let me stop the